There we go. Well, welcome everybody. I am pleased to see so many people joining us today. While we're waiting for others to join, and we're not going to wait too long, but while we're waiting, if you would go ahead and notice in the chat that Megan has posted a request for you to share your role at A&M and why you decided to join us. Greetings, Nate. Excellent. Welcome, Rebecca. All right, well, while you all are sharing a little bit about yourselves, let me share a little bit about myself. My name is Sally Hughes. My role is Manager Instructional Design within the Office of Academic Innovation. I work predominantly with templates in our digital learning management system. I'm also the person who's been tasked with doing the digital accessibility of those templates and other projects that our office is working on. My background is in instructional design and professional development. And I also have experience with quality assurance programs and obviously digital accessibility. Looking, oh wow, from Wisconsin, Rebecca, that's great. So looking at some of the people who have joined us, I see people we've got in who work in departments with courses in Canvas, instructional designers, people in staff positions. Let's see, vet med, lots of different things here. So excellent. I'm so glad you all were able to join us. We're going to be focusing on digital accessibility in our digital learning environment, Canvas, but we will also be covering digital accessibility of documents that are created outside of Canvas. So those of you who are not affiliated with A&M, you will be able to get something out of this session. So just a little community building, a little fun activity. Consider the photo that you have as your wallpaper on your phone or on your desktop on your computer. Go ahead and share that photo if you have the ability to, or you could describe it. I want to see a little bit about you. What does it tell about you and why did you choose it? And I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so that I can do the same. And I'll share my photo. So just a little bit about me. As you can tell, I am a dog person. On my screen, you'll see my dog Bonnie, who is a Great Dane, and she is an avid camper, and she's always in our back seat when we pull the Airstream to whatever campsite we're headed to. We don't camp quite as much as we used to, but we do enjoy camping. So just a little bit about me. Anybody else changing their background? Oh, Nico's got a cool background. You want to share what it's about, Nico?
This is one of the default backgrounds.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. That's
no custom backgrounds.
I don't have any. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem. I see some being shared in the chat. Sharon shared one about their trip to Canada. That's awesome. Sharon, both my parents are Canadian, so I've been to Canada many times. Christy shared her wallpaper is her holding her 6-week-old grandson. That's fun. And I'm a new grandmother too, Christy, so totally get that. Anyone else want to share a little bit about theirs? And CJ's here from my department. No background, CJ? Melissa shared the Aggie ring, just like we're all proud of. Whoop. Excellent. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the content of our program today. Okay, so today we have many things that we're going to cover. And my hope is by the time this webinar is done, you will have many new skills, or at least have new knowledge about some skills. So we are going to talk about the benefits of accessible courses and incorporating Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, into that course design. We're also going to look at the Ally tool that is integrated into our Canvas learning management system and how you can locate that. I'm also going to show you how you can use the accessibility report that is available within Ally to identify content within your course that is inaccessible. I'm going to also help you to have accessible pages within Canvas and what that would look like. Additionally, we're going to look at those source documents, those documents that are created outside of Canvas, and what types of components you need to or should incorporate in order to make sure that they are integrated, or I'm sorry, accessible. And then also we will have an overall Q&A. After each of these 5 sessions, before we get to the end, I'm going to have some short question and answer periods so that you have the ability to ask a question when the information is right there and we're just covering it. So one of the things I want you to understand about today's session is this is a lot of content. And if I were to go into the nitty-gritty of exactly how to do this or how to do that in Canvas or in Word, it would probably be a full day session. And so we're going to take kind of a bird's eye view today. And one of the things I wanted to assure you is, as Megan said, this session is being recorded. So you will have the ability to go back and re-listen to or re-watch sections that maybe you didn't catch, or maybe after the session you wanted some clarification. Additionally, I'm going to share my slides. Those will be available to you. It's important for me today that you understand the why and the what of digital accessibility more than the how for this session. The how, like I said, could be a full session. So we're going to look at a bird's eye view, and hopefully by the end, you'll have a general knowledge of what it means to be accessible within a digital document or a digital learning management system. So we're going to start with Universal Design for Learning. Our first goal is that you would be able to discuss or recognize the benefits for all learners of accessible courses and incorporating Universal Design for Learning into your course design. So before we start on UDL, I want to just kind of bring to your forethought the prevalence of disabilities within different populations. Disabilities can be permanent or temporary, and they can vary substantially in severity from person to person. So in the United States, about 26% of all adults have some type of disability. And the same holds true in Texas. And keep in mind that can be a permanent disability or a temporary one. And then at Texas A&M, our Office of Disability Resources serves over 4,600 students over all the disability categories. So one thing I want you to know is making your course accessible, obviously, is going to meet the needs of students who have an identified disability. However, it can also make your course more usable and meet the needs of other learners as well. So there are lots of disability types. We're going to look at a few of them. And these are the types of disabilities that students may experience that can impact learning. This is not an exhaustive list. And I want you to keep in mind that some people experience more than one type of disability at a time. Not all of these will result in a student going to the Disability Resources Office and getting an accommodations in the classroom or in the digital learning environment. And if you have specific questions about that process where students get an accommodation letter, I would encourage you to contact the Disability Resources Office. So looking at some of these types, attention deficit hyperactivity can affect a person's ability to focus. Autism, there's a wide range of conditions of people who are on the autism spectrum. Students might be deaf or hearing impaired. My mouse disappeared. There we go. You might also have students who have some type of health-related disability, such as a chronic condition, or maybe they're fighting an illness, such as cancer. You might have students who have an intellectual disability, and this can be a condition that someone is born with, or it could be the result of an illness or an accident. Learning disabilities, such as dyslexia or dysgraphia. Mental health, we hear a lot about that in the news recently, just because of the impact that COVID had on not only students' mental health, but faculty. Everyone had some type of impact, but mental health can impact a person's motivation, which strongly impacts learning. A physical disability, this can impact a person's mobility or even their ability to use a computer mouse or a touchpad. A speech impairment. This can impact the ability to follow oral instructions. It could be accompanied by deficits in reading and spelling. And when I say speech impairment, that could also be a language impairment as well. Traumatic brain injury. We have a lot of veterans, and sometimes they come with impact type injuries. Blind, low vision, or colorblind. Some learners use assistive technology such as screen readers. Color blindness, while we don't normally think of that as a disability, it can impact how learners are able to interpret resources in a digital learning environment. And then again, keep in mind that some disabilities are temporary. I'll give you an example. My son had a concussion, and it was a result of an injury that he sustained during a football practice, and it strongly impacted his ability to process information, and it slowed down his ability to demonstrate his learning mastery. 3 weeks later, he was completely back to his normal state. So during that time where he was impacted by the results of that concussion, we had to put some types of supports in place to help him to be successful. EDUCAUSE has a great site for increasing the accessibility of a course, and probably pretty soon, Megan or Christy will put the link to that article, which I encourage you to read at a different time. Before we move on, thinking about these disabilities that are listed here and their need for accessible courses, I want to read you the United States Office of Civil Rights and the U.S. Department of Education's definition of accessibility. So accessible, and I'm quoting here, accessible means a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. And the second sentence is, I think, the most important one. The person with a disability must be able to obtain the information as fully, equally, and independently as a person without a disability. So this webinar is being provided to increase your awareness of what goes into digital accessibility so that you can start to create digital learning resources and you build them to be fully accessible. It's much more efficient to work accessibility standards into your work ahead proactively than having to go back to these same resources that you've previously created and remediate them in order to make them accessible. No one is expecting you to fully implement digital accessibility after this session. This is a learning process, and just like any other learning process, will take time. So we're going to do a quick poll. Let me get the polls up. Okay, before we start into session one, I think it would be helpful to know a little more about your teaching contexts and familiarity with digital accessibility. So before I launch this poll, can Megan or Christy, will you share the link to the A&M course modalities?
I got it.
Thank you. And these course modalities are the official modalities. I think all of us recognize that a lot of courses kind of are between two modalities. So to the best of your ability, I want you to kind of think about what and how you teach and what modality best matches your courses. I'll give you a second to look at that, and then I'm going to launch our poll. Okay. So respond to the poll. Give you about 30 seconds more. Okay, we got about 3 people who haven't submitted their poll. I'll give you just a second to get that done, and then we're gonna share the results. Okay, so let's look at the results of the poll. Most of you are teaching a traditional face-to-face course. We do have some people who are totally web-based, some people who are kind of in between, that kind of hybrid. Almost 60% of us are using Canvas for everything. Some people are using Canvas for some things, and some people are doing less than that. And we actually have a couple people who are not using Canvas at all, which is fine. This makes me a little bit happy that some people, that nobody said they had no idea what an accessible course meant. And so we've got some people who are already competent in doing digital accessibility. We have some people who have identified that they have a little bit to learn, and then some people who have a lot to learn, which is absolutely what I would expect at this point. So let's go ahead and jump into Universal Design for Learning. So looking at these 2 quotes, UDL is a framework that improves and optimizes teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights of how humans learn. And the author of that quote is actually the developer of the Universal Design for Learning framework, CAST. The second quote should seem familiar to some of us. It is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible, without the need for adaptation or specialized design. And it benefits people of all ages and abilities. And that, I really like that quote from our own disability resources team, simply because it recognizes that, yes, although UDL comes from a background for people who have a disability, it also benefits lots of people who don't have any disability. So before we jump into more on UDL, we're going to watch a very short video. Let me get it to the screen where you can actually see it. Hold on. I know you can't see it.
In the early 1960s, visionary architect Selwyn Goldsmith designed the initial curb cut, or dropped curb, to encourage people with limited mobility to have access to city sidewalks. Now, this was part of a larger movement led largely by disability advocates toward universal access in the built environment. And this would be done by changing policies, systems, and structures to promote full inclusion. In the last few decades, architects, product developers, and UX designers have embraced this philosophy of universal design. Coined by the architect Ronald Mace, universal design is built on the core belief that we should design environments to be usable by all people without the need for adaptation or specialized design. This inclusive approach allows everyone to benefit from such designs. Hence, caregivers pushing strollers will benefit from curb cuts. Similarly, viewers use closed captioning on videos regardless of their hearing. In other words, when you design for everyone, everyone benefits from the design. Universal design for learning applies the same philosophy of universal design to every aspect of learning, from learning spaces to materials to instruction and assessment to classroom culture and behavior management. Built around cognitive neuroscience, UDL is an inclusive educational framework that seeks to remove barriers while also keeping the learning challenging for all students. This UDL approach includes a paradigm shift from a deficit mindset to neurodiversity, and from singular accommodations to universally accessible scaffolds and support, and from a teacher-centric view to a student-centered approach centered on student agency. In the 1990s,
and that's where we're going to stop. And you're welcome to watch that, the rest of that video if you are interested. I'd be happy to share the link with you. But basically what I wanted to get at is universal design obviously benefits students who have disabilities, but it also benefits all users of a digital environment. So knowing that, we want to look at the components of universal design now. There are three main components. The first component incorporates multiple means of engagement. This is the why of learning. It offers options and supports to stimulate motivation and sustained enthusiasm for learning. The goal of multiple means of engagement is to have students or learners who are purposeful and motivated. The second component is multiple means of representation. This is presenting information in different ways to support access and understanding. And the goal of providing multiple means of representation is to have learners who are resourceful and knowledgeable. The third component of UDL is multiple means of action and expression. That means that you're offering options and supports to all so everyone can create, learn, and share. The goal of multiple means of action and expression is to have learners who are strategic and goal-directed. As you saw in the video, UDL is about universality of learning. And although it supports students who have one or more of the disability types shown earlier, it also supports all learners. So there is a full graphic that goes into a little bit more detail that either Christy or Megan will share in the chat. One of the things that I want you to know, though, is, like I said previously, going into a deep dive on these three components: engagement, representation, and action and expression, would be a full day session in itself. We're going to focus on the multiple means of representation as we learn more about digital accessibility. So within Aggieland, both Technology Services and the Office for Academic Innovation have provided tools that will help you to make your course more digitally accessible. So the first tool is Canvas, and there are two ways that Canvas can support digital accessibility, and that is in providing delivery of resources to your students. So providing resources through a course in Canvas increases the access of content outside of class time. Many of you indicated you teach face-to-face classes, and it also enables someone who uses assistive technology to utilize that with resources that are provided. It improves the usability of your course by providing a single location for students to access course resources. Additionally, in Canvas, we have the Canvas template. Now, the Canvas template has been made 100% accessible, and I heard something in the Faculty Senate meeting earlier, just last month, where someone mentioned using the template, and as soon as you edit it, it makes it inaccessible. That's not completely true. You can edit parts of the template without changing the level of accessibility, but it is true if you're adding documents or resources to your course that are inaccessible, then certainly the course accessibility level will be decreased. But the Canvas template addresses limitations on students' cognitive load for those who have difficulty focusing, or for those who have challenges navigating a course, as it provides a consistent experience in terms of course organization, course structure, and the location of resources that you're providing in your course. Another tool that we have available for you is the Ally tool, and it's integrated into Canvas automatically. It identifies content in a Canvas shell that is inaccessible, allowing faculty to remediate that. We will talk about the most efficient way to address different accessibility issues during this session. And then we also have productivity programs such as Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint or Adobe Acrobat or even Excel. All of those programs have built-in accessibility checkers, and they're quite easy to use. They're, to me, almost easier than a spell check or grammar check, because it gives you the steps to remediating the object. Going on. So today our focus is going to be to work on meeting the needs of diverse learners. We're going to focus on accessible text and images in files, documents, in Canvas web pages. And so the Ally tool that I mentioned earlier has an institutional report that shows there are many accessibility issues within all of the TAMU courses. Some of those issues are more prevalent in the digital learning environment. They can prevent students from being able to access the instructional content that you share in your course. If you think back to the definition of accessibility that I shared earlier, we want all of our students to have an educational experience that meets their needs without having to constantly advocate for equitable access to instructional resources. So thinking about that, the three biggest accessibility issues that are in all of the courses in our Canvas learning management system are PDF in accessibility. And I know a lot of people use PDFs in their courses because they have a smaller file size. And when you are faced with a storage limit within your course, this is an important issue. Now, PDFs are mainly inaccessible. The most prevalent issue is because they're not OCR, which stands for optical character recognition. That means a screen reader can't read it. So we'll look at that today. Additionally, anytime an image is used, it needs to have a written description called an alt text, which allows someone who's using a screen reader to be able to get the same information from that image, even though they are unable to see it. And then header structure in text. Header structure in text, whether it's on a Canvas page or in a Word document, allows someone who does not use a mouse to navigate that document or that page. A header actually creates navigation hierarchy within documents, and it allows someone to use the tab key or the arrow buttons on a keyboard to navigate. All right, so taking just a few minutes, really limiting it to no more than 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions specifically about UDL or the need to create accessible courses? Thank you, Megan. If not, we can just go on. Yes, we'll talk a little bit about color blindness, Yvonne. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to go ahead. So we're going to start with looking at the Ally report that's within our Canvas digital learning environment. If you have, well, most of you are on a computer right now, following along with our webinar. If you are affiliated with Texas A&M, I would encourage you to open up Canvas and follow along in some of the areas that we're going to look at, just so that you have the ability to see the tools, where they are, how to use them, that type of thing. It's going to be more meaningful to you if you actually are following along in the learning management system. All right, so we have a poll. Let me get to our polls. It's just one question. Have you accessed the Ally Accessibility Report within Canvas? All right, so it looks like we have a broad range. It's like a reverse bell curve. So some of us, I'm going to give just a few minutes more, 15, 16 people. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So you should be able to see that we basically have a reverse bell curve. Almost half of you have opened it and reviewed your course, and almost as much have never even noticed it before, with a few in between who have opened it but don't really understand it, or they've seen it but not opened it. So that's great. Gives me a little bit of information on where to spend our time. So let's look at the Ally Accessibility Report. So this is a sample Ally course. I'm going to be using my training course today. So if you see training, it's not a live fall shell or anything like that. But to find the Ally Accessibility Report, it is in your navigation bar. And if you don't see it in your navigation bar, that just means that either you or a TA or whoever else is in your course has hidden it from your navigation settings. And the way you would go get it back or pull it up onto your nav bar is through your settings and your navigation tab to enable that. So the Ally tool is used to identify the accessibility of items you add to your Canvas course. It is in the nav menu by default. Let's see, I want to make sure. What this tool does is it's packaged, and it was developed by Blackboard. So it does work with other learning management systems. Clearly it works with Canvas, but what it does is it will review Canvas tool objects such as pages or announcements, but it will also review anything that you upload into Canvas, whether it's a Word doc or a PowerPoint presentation or even an image. So let me just make sure if there's anybody who needs me to show how to get the Ally report added, pop that into the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to skip that. Okay, we're going to go forward. So if you pull up an accessibility report within your course, you will see this interface. A couple things I wanted to point out about this interface. It automatically launches you into the overview tab. Okay, but notice next to it is also a content tab, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. While in the overview tab, this top course accessibility score means overall, out of all the things that it checks in Canvas and the things you have brought into your Canvas course, this is the overall accessibility score. Okay, so this is pretty good. 97% is very good. We've seen some as low as in the 50s because things have been added that have not been accessible. Now, down below here in this area, you will see a graphic that shows all the course content that was checked. So this 96 is not a score. It's simply a number telling you how many items were checked, and the breakdown of that number is here. Okay, and you can view it if you wish to. Over on the right side on the overview tab are two different strategies about how to remediate your course, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. If I click on the content tab on that accessibility report, what will happen is the view will change and you will see a list. The first thing on the list is the name of the content that was checked. The second thing is this issues column. And then there's a third column called score. And you'll notice there's a little arrow next to it because this is actually a sortable list. You can sort it from the lowest score to the highest, or I think by default, it starts with the highest to the lowest. Now, issues is anything that deems an inaccessible point in a document or a page. A single document can have more than one issue, and those issues are what contribute to that overall accessibility score in your course. So this first thing on my list here is a JPEG image, and it's got one issue. But if you move further down, you can see this Word document has 4 issues. The more issues something has that makes it inaccessible, the lower the score. Now, you're probably thinking, well, this only has 1 and it's a 25% score, and this has 4 issues and it's a 59%. How can that be? Well, this one issue deems this image completely inaccessible to someone who's using a screen reader. More than likely with an image, your issue is going to be that it needs alt text or a description so that someone who can't see the image can get the same level of understanding from it. If this was fixed, it would be a 100%. There's only one way for an image to be inaccessible. If you go further down, a Word document has several ways it can be inaccessible. It might have an image with a missing alt tag. It might be lacking those headers that I mentioned earlier. So even though it has more issues, they may actually not be as impactful as that one issue for that file, that image file. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to go into the details of the images on the Ally tool yet. We're going to do that next, but if there's any questions about how to access or locate the Ally accessibility report in Canvas, now's your chance to ask. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. All right, so we're going to now look at interpreting this Ally report. So I mentioned a minute ago that using the Ally report will help you to identify ways to increase the percentage of accessible content. And remember, on the content slide, as you see here, the score column indicates an item's level of accessibility. In that score column, you saw the percentage, but you probably also noticed that there is a colored icon, and those icons have meaning. There are actually 4 levels of icons. They are either low, which is the red icon, which means that item requires revision. It has severe digital accessibility issues. An orange icon means that the document is somewhere between 34 and 66% inaccessible. The item is accessible, but requires revision to be fully accessible. Now, these last 2 look very similar. The way you can tell them apart is look at where the little dial on this, the little hand on the dial is. This light green icon means a document is anywhere from 67 to 99% accessible, but there are opportunities to improve the accessibility of it. And then if you have the dark green icon, that means it's perfect, and there's nothing more you can do to increase the accessibility of it. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. So these icons are also visible to you within your course. You may have noticed them when you look at different things on pages or in assignments. They appear as soon, they can appear as soon as you upload a document into your course, but sometimes they're not always visible. And I have noticed that Ally scores can also take some time after something is uploaded into the course. So if you don't see the icon immediately, give it a little time and then check back. While we're on the topic, I want you to know that I have noticed that Ally has some quirks to it, but it is a great tool for a couple reasons. Number one, it helps those of us who are building these courses to work to make it fully accessible. The other things that Ally does is it will provide students the opportunity to access a resource in a different format. And so that in itself makes Ally really usable for our students. We're going to talk about making remediation of these issues. But what I want you to realize is Ally is only a tool. You're going to do the remediation of issues in a different tool. You'll either make your remediation edits within a Canvas page or assignment, or in a Word document using the Word program. We strongly recommend that you do not make your changes in Ally. And the reason why is because Ally and Canvas, they're kind of like stepsisters or step siblings. They weren't born together into the same family. And so there are some quirks about using Ally within Canvas. One of them is if you make changes to things in your Canvas course within the Ally tool, the next semester, you'll have to do it again because those changes don't stick. And so that's why we're recommending that you don't do the changes within Ally, you do them in your Canvas page or in a Word document or wherever that document originated from, wherever that program was. Okay. So you're going to use this Ally report to identify ways to increase the percentage of your accessible content. I'm right in the middle of doing this with another course, and I'm at 98%. And I'm working really hard to get to 100%, but it is challenging. Even someone who knows a lot about digital accessibility, even I'm struggling to get this course to 100%. So in the overview area, recall that there were these two strategies on remediating your course and the items in it. The first one says to address content that is easiest to fix, with the easiest issues to fix. The second one says to fix the low scoring content. And so if you think back to those icons and what they mean, if you have a document whose score is a light green or an orange, that document is already somewhat accessible. And in the case of the light green, it's mostly accessible. But if you have a document with a red score or a red icon, it's completely inaccessible. And so it is our recommendation that you should fix your low scoring content first, and then work up to those that are somewhat accessible, so that everybody can benefit from the content you put in your course. And how you do that will come next. So any questions about interpreting the Ally report or about the colors of those icons, anything like that? Anyone? All right, let's get to the meat. So accessibility of Canvas pages. By the time we're done this section, I'm hoping that you have a general knowledge of using the Canvas Rich Content Editor. We kind of shorten that to RCE for remediating content within the Canvas digital learning environment. And we're going to look at a little poll here. So I want to get an idea about your use of Canvas pages. So I have a quick question for you. A few more responses. So within Canvas, there are what we call pages. It's generally where you put text, and that's what I'm referring to. And I'll show you one in just a second if you're not sure what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end our poll. So it shows that most of us have created or edited a Canvas page before. Some of you have done that and met accessibility standards. Some of you have done that, but not really worried about accessibility. And then we have a smaller group who have never created a page before. And that's absolutely fine, because I'm going to share with you some pages. All right, let me get to my training course and reshare. Okay, you should be able to see my Canvas training course. And just for demonstration purposes, this would be where you start when you come into a course on your homepage. This is the template, by the way. So those of you who are not sure what I'm talking about with the Canvas template, the Canvas template includes home pages and then some other pages that go with these different buttons. So to make a Canvas page, you want to go into your pages and then view all pages to create a new one. And this just means new page. So here is the Canvas Rich Content Editor. This is the RCE that I was talking about here. And so those of you who have done this before know that you have to provide a title, and this is where you can put text. You can edit that text using these tools. You can add links, images, You can bring things in from other media sources such as MediaSite. You can bring in files. You can bring in some of our other integrations such as MediaSite or Office 365. And then there are some other formatting tools here, okay? These three dots bring up some other tools that maybe specific groups will use, such as the math type for our faculty who require that. Probably the most important tool for you here, though, is this tool down here at the bottom, which is your accessibility checker. As you are developing a page, you want to keep an eye on this because you don't actually have to click it. It will tell you if you have something inaccessible on your page. Okay, wait a minute. Are you guys even seeing my screen? I want to make sure because my line that goes
We do.
outside. Okay, good. My line that indicates the screen is being shared kind of disappeared. So I just wanted to make sure. So this tool right here is going to indicate an inaccessible item on your page with a number next to it. So let me show you an example of that. Okay, so this is a page that I have previously created. And so in this page, there are lots of things on here that are inaccessible. And you can see there's actually 8 items on here that are inaccessible. And we'll look at those in just a second. So before we do, I wanted to kind of summarize what you're looking for when you are deciding if something is accessible or not. Okay, so there's the blank page I showed you. So Canvas pages, there are 7 things listed here. A heading is an automatically formatted set of text that you might associate with titles and subtitles. I'll go into details on that in just a second. Images, as I mentioned earlier, need alt text. Lists should be formatted using the list tools. Text color, and somebody asked about color blindness. I'll talk about that in just a second. The text color you use and the background behind it should have sufficient enough contrast that someone who may have low vision can see or determine where the text is. Colorblind students need to be able to distinguish if you're using color. So if you have a page where all of this category is red text and all of that category is green text, someone who has that form of color blindness would not necessarily be able to see the difference between those two. So what you want to do is make sure that if you're using text and you want to distinguish between this text and that text, you use something other than color. For example, this text might be bold, this text might be italicized, or you could even use different fonts. That's a little bit harder to distinguish, but definitely don't want to use color as the only distinguishing characteristic if you expect students to be able to tell the difference between them. Tables that you put into a Canvas page should have what's called a caption, which is another fancy word for a title to your table. And then you need to identify a header row or a header column that basically articulates a category that everything in that row or in that column will be an example of. If you are providing links, you want to make sure that the linked text is descriptive and tells your user where it's going to take them. And then, of course, again, use that accessibility checker. So let me go back to my page that was not very accessible. And let's look at examples of those. So the first thing I said was headings. This would be an example of a heading. So for titles, for subtitles, you want to format those using headings and know that the title of the page is going to be considered heading 1. And basically what you're doing is you're creating kind of an outline of sections of the page. And so the heading 1 is always the title of your page, So you're going to want to make the next heading in order. Here's where you articulate your headings as heading 2. Okay. Then if you have even subtitles underneath those, kind of picture it how it would look if you were putting it into an outline. This is lesser than this, so this would become heading 3, and so on. Okay. One of the other things I said was images need alt description. So here I have an image, and you especially need a description or an alt text if your image has text on it like mine does. So how do you add that? So you click the offending image and you will see the image options comes up. So when I click that, over here, I have 2 options. I can add alt text. Whoops, come back. I can add alt text in this top box, or I can determine if the graphic is decorative only. For example, this yellow line would be a decorative only graphic, but this is not. If you expect people who can see the image to get something from it, then please don't mark it as decorative. You want to actually put a description in here and be as descriptive as you can. So this would require a considerable amount of alt text because you want your student to know something along these lines. Pyramid showing levels of engagement with different types of activities. Teach another would be 90%, practice would be 75%, and so on. Some descriptions can be quite lengthy. And so you want to put in enough text that someone who can't see it is getting the same amount of information out of it as someone who can. Let me stop for just a second, because I recognize depending on what you teach, that can be a really hard thing to do, kind of an undue burden. So you want to make sure that you are doing the best you can so that your students who can't see the images are getting a similar experience. Okay. Another thing that I mentioned was text color. So looking up here, this is a very light text on a white background. And this is another example, red text on a gray background. This actually came from one of the courses that I've looked at recently. That's almost impossible to see. And so you want to make sure there's sufficient contrast between your background color, which is most of the time white, and the text color. I mentioned formatting lists. You'll look at this. This is a numbered list here. If I was doing what I should be doing for digital accessibility, I'm not going to manually type in 1 period space. I'm going to use my list making tools to auto format that. Amazingly, a screen reader will actually identify a list for the user. The other thing that I mentioned was tables. So if you look at this table, it does not have a caption. If I added a caption to this, it would have an additional row at the top with just the caption or the title. I also mentioned that it should have a header row or a header column. In this case, it's going to be a header row because these 2 items articulate what's in the column below. So everything in this column is a type of strategy. Everything in this column is a type of example. And so what it will do when you make it a header row or column is it will make it bold. And not only that, but it actually alters the HTML code, and a screen reader will pick up that and communicate to the user that there's a table and it's reading from a table, and it identifies the header row or column. So let me show you what this accessibility checker will do. So here's what you get if you have a contrast problem. Okay, and it'll tell you you should have a minimum contrast ratio. Most people don't understand these numbers, and that's okay. If you just go in and predominantly use dark text on light background, you will be good to go. Another alt tag or alt text, you can't use the name, the file name for it. Here we have formatting as lists. So you can check that and apply it, and it will identify it as a list. Here's another contrast issue, another alt tag issue. And then here's the table issues. So if I were to say that this is example activities, oops, my giant C there. And then apply it, watch what happens here on the table. See, it's already added it, but it's going to add it in a row. Okay. And then it says you don't have any headers in this table. So I can identify a header row and it centers it and makes it bold. I think I have one more, another alt text. So now I have fewer issues. I've only fixed the ones that are in the table. Okay. All right. So let me see where we're at. I identify that just in case we lost the ability to get into Canvas. You might have questions about this. One of the things I want to assure you is some of these things that I was looking for, headings, table properties, text to background contrast. These are going to be consistent regardless of where you're doing it, whether it's in Microsoft Word or your Canvas pages or even PowerPoint. So does anybody have a question about how to increase the accessibility of Canvas pages? And just as a quick reminder, these were the things we were looking for. Headings, images with alt text, formatting lists, making sure that your text color and the background have sufficient contrast, formatting your tables. Oh, I didn't even cover descriptive links. I'll get that one in the next. Any questions? Post it in the chat or unmute yourself. None? Okay, well, if you think of a question, you're always welcome to ask it. All right, we're going to look at files created outside of Canvas now. So most of you who use Canvas, you bring in content from other programs. And so as we progress on, I want you to be able to apply or at least have an understanding of accessibility standards that are needed for text and images in source documents, such as those created in Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Adobe Acrobat. I'm going to make an assumption based on lots of years of doing some work in accessibility is that most people don't create documents in Adobe Acrobat unless it's some other purpose of a course. For example, forms in Adobe Acrobat to feed into a database. But for most coursework, people predominantly use Adobe PDFs because it's a smaller file size or it is less easy for students to edit them. So we'll cover Adobe, but we'll spend more time with Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. So accessibility standards can be used on digital documents, whether they are inside or outside of Canvas. You don't have to plan on putting this in Canvas to implement these types of standards. The components of these documents, such as headings and lists, can be used regardless of your course modality or your course setting. And it ensures your student population or your audience can access the document easily. So suppose you work for a state agency. They're required by law to create only accessible websites, accessible forms, accessible documents. And so those components that I talked about earlier, headings, formatted lists, described images, all of those things are part of making whatever document, whatever product you're creating accessible. Okay. Last poll. And this is just to give me a little bit of information about the types of documents that you create. And this is a check all that apply. Okay, so what types of documents do you use in your course, outside of your course? I'll know where to spend most of my time. Got a few more people. All right, this is an interesting result. So 92% of you use PDFs and 77% of you use both PowerPoints and Word documents, and then a lesser number use Office 365, which is just the cloud-based version of PowerPoint or Word documents. And then we also have some who use Google Docs. So let me talk briefly about the tools in all of these. So anything that is Microsoft, so that includes Word, PowerPoint, and Office 365. All of those have a pretty robust accessibility checker and accessibility system that will support you in making your documents accessible. Google Docs, I've searched and have not found an accessibility checker. So Megan or Christy, if you have anything to add to that about Google Docs being accessible, please share. So Google Docs can be downloaded into Word. It can mess with your formatting a little bit, but if you had to choose between Google Docs and Office 365, with both of those being cloud-based storage and document creation, I would choose Office 365 just because it is going to have more support for you in terms of making your things accessible. PDFs, which most of you report using, are the absolute hardest to make accessible. So it is my recommendation, and I'll show you why in just a second. It is my recommendation that instead of trying to make a PDF accessible in Adobe Acrobat, you try to find the original document that you created it in, and then saved it as a PDF. Okay, and I'll show you why in just a second. I'm going to start speeding up a little bit so we can get through everything. Let's get rid of the poll. All right, so issues with documents that have been uploaded into Canvas should be addressed in the source document. I said that earlier. That means it's outside of Canvas in the source program. And that's not pages like this one. I mean, that you can't edit a page outside of Canvas, but it would be things like an image or a Word document that you would address within the Word program. Okay. It is important to identify the document by using this Ally report. So remember, we talked about the content tab and then going over here, clicking the score function so that it sorts them lowest score to highest score. And what will happen is you will have a list, and basically it's a to-do list. You want to start working on those with the lowest score. So let me get into my Canvas course and pull up the accessibility report and the content tab, and mine's already sorted lowest to highest. And so what I meant earlier when I said don't change or remediate within Ally, if I click this document, come on, it's making a liar out of me. It's not opening. Normally, not now, of course, not now. Normally, it will open up a window that tells you what the issue is and gives you an opportunity to remediate it. So, for example, if I click this document, and I'm just going to redo this accessibility report just to make sure, because it would be helpful for you to see this. There we go. So this is what I mean by don't fix it within the Ally program. It tells you what's wrong. Okay, so this image is missing a description, and then it gives you the opportunity here in Ally. Notice I'm in Ally. It opened up a new window. I could add an alt description here and click add, and it would no longer show up on this list. But the problem is when I take this course and copy it or export it and import it to the next semester, all those alt descriptions disappear and I have to do it all again. Okay, so the best way to do it is to make sure that if you're using that image, say in a page, you add the alt description in the page. Or if it's a PDF document or a Word document, you go to that program outside of Canvas to get that remediation done. Okay. All right, let me make sure I'm getting, so we talked about sorting to get the least to high scores, locating the name here, and then you can either find it in your personal files from where you originally created it and uploaded it. And if you can't find it in your personal files, what you could do is go to your course files here. See course files here. You click on that and you locate it within your course files. And then you would want to download that document in order to work in Word or to work in PowerPoint. Okay. Now, Word documents. This should look familiar. In a Word document, the same kind of standards apply. You need headings for titles and subtitles to create that hierarchy for someone who's using the tab key or the arrow keys to navigate the document. If you have an image on that Word document, please add alt text. If you are using a list, create it using the list making tools. If you are using text color, make sure that you have sufficient background contrast, or make sure that you are considering what would happen if someone who is colorblind had to interact with that text. Would they be at a disadvantage? If you're using a table, make sure that you're adding the caption and identifying the header row or the header column. And then I told you I would get to descriptive links, so let me get there now. So let's look at a Word document, okay? So Word, PowerPoint, any Microsoft program has an accessibility checker. So if you look here, I'm in the Review tab on the menu bar where you would find your spell check, and right next to it is Check Accessibility. When I click that button, what will happen is this window on the side will open. And you'll notice that I have errors that need to be remediated. If it simply said warnings, those are not essential. Errors are essential. So in this case, I have a couple images that are missing alt text. So let's go ahead and look at an actual Word document so that you can see what that would look like in adding alt text, because that was one of our 3 big ones. So give me just a second. Okay, so let's look at this live Word document. If I go to review and I click check accessibility, this comes up, okay? Now, this sometimes will try to suggest alternative text. If you see that, and I think it showed it here too, that means that the system, the program, is trying to give you the text it thinks you want your students to know. So let's look at that for a second. Before we do, I wanted to show you one thing on this window. And this is what makes Microsoft programs superior, in my opinion, to Adobe programs or Google programs. It will help you identify what needs to be fixed. Down below, it'll tell you why it needs to be fixed. And here's the best part, it will give you the steps to fix it. So it's step-by-step instructions on how you can give Picture 2 the alternative text that it's missing, okay? And it probably says that you right-click on the item and you go down and find Edit Alt Text, And this is what it said the alternative text should be. And this was automatically generated. Sometimes it's decent, sometimes it's enough. More often than not, it's not. So just a little hint with that. Okay. Let's look at links because I haven't talked about links yet. A document with a link in it should have a description of where that link is taking them. So you may remember it was very common practice, especially when people started using links within documents, to say, for more information, click here. And the word here would be linked to an outside website or an outside document. That is considered not good digital citizenship anymore. Yes, it's part of accessibility, but it's really kind of universal acceptability. In this day and age of malware and phishing schemes, if you're providing a link to someone, you should link text that says where that link will take a person. For example, I might put, for more information on digital accessibility, please look at Technology Services Accessibility Initiative. And I would link Technology Service Accessibility Initiative using all four of those words so that if someone does click that link, they know that the website they're being taken to is named in the link. They know exactly where it's going to take them. That's what I mean by descriptive links. All right, moving on to PowerPoints, you'll see some similarities.
Sally, we do
Yes.
have a question about
Oh, good.
if you take care of all the accessibility issues in Word, then when you save it as a PDF,
For the most part, yes. And there's a couple things that don't come over because there's no opportunity in Word to create them, but I'll show you that real quick. Okay, it's one of the easier things to fix in Word. Okay, good question. And a lot of people will make PDFs of their PowerPoints too. So the most accessible way to create that PDF, which I haven't talked about yet, but is oftentimes in Word, people will create a PDF by doing print and then print to PDF versus save as a Adobe PDF. It is more accessible to do save as than to print to PDF. If you're taking a Word document or PowerPoint, use the save as function to create the PowerPoint or to create the PDF. All right, so some of these things are similar, and thank you for letting me know that. I think that was Christy. Format headings, same thing, images with alt text, format list, text color, tables need captions and header rows, descriptive links, and then down at the bottom, you see this one that wasn't in Word documents, identify reading order. The reason this is a component of PowerPoint accessibility is because oftentimes a PowerPoint slide will have word or text boxes all over the page. And basically what that does is you are showing a user who can't see these different text boxes the proper order to read them in because they're going to be using a screen reader. Okay, that's really the only component of PowerPoint that Word doesn't include. And again, PowerPoint has an accessibility checker as well. So just to show you, let me pull up the PowerPoint we're working in. Same menu bar, review, accessibility checker. And if I bring this up, one of the things, whoa, don't want to do that. One of the things that it will do is same with the Word accessibility checker. If you have an error, it will tell you why you need to fix it and the steps to how to fix it. All right. Going on. All right, so moving on to, oh, there's my example. So here's a PowerPoint. It's got the same type of setup, review, check accessibility. I didn't mention this earlier. Word and other Microsoft products actually have an ongoing accessibility kind of review. And if you see the word investigate, like this one shows, excuse me, that means you need to look at something because something is not accessible. But just different examples, no alt text on this one. Look at the difference between these two words in terms of contrast between the text and the background. And again, it'll show you warnings and errors, and then it will tell you why you should fix it and the steps on how to fix it. All right, so let's get to PDFs. So lots of people will create a document in Word or a document or presentation in PowerPoint, and then they want to save it as a PDF for the reduced file size, but also it makes it a little bit harder for students to edit. But rest assured, I'm telling you this, students can edit PDFs, so just keep that in mind. PDF uses different phrasing. So tags simply means, have you formatted your headings? Have you formatted your lists? Have you formatted your tables? There's a different tag for each of these types of text formatting that is created when you save a document as a PDF. So if you haven't formatted these things correctly, say in Word, then you're going to be missing tags when you come to PDF. Same with images and alt text, text color, contrast, descriptive links. And then this is the one that you cannot set in Word and have it bring it over. I will tell you though, this is the easiest one to do. PDFs have settings within their documents that relate to what the title of the document is and the language used. And that just allows someone who is using assistive technology to have an overall understanding of what document is open and using the appropriate language. Let me show you what checking a PDF looks like. So I told you it was a little trickier. So to get the accessibility checker, it's not really on by default. You first have to go to your Tools tab and find accessibility on the page and then add it to your shortcut of tools. This is the accessibility checker tool on my shortcut, my tool shortcut. Once I click that, it'll bring up this window. So I click accessibility check. It'll bring up another window. I couldn't include it all. And you have to actually say, yes, check accessibility. Once it's done checking the accessibility, it'll bring up this and it'll show you all the errors to correct. Now, I will tell you, this document has a ton of errors, but the main two that you'll be able to fix on your own without having created it in Word is this document settings. And unlike Word and PowerPoint, it doesn't really tell you how to do it, but rest assured, we are in the process of developing several help docs and resources for you to remediate all types of documents, whether you're using them in Word or whether you're creating them in Word, PowerPoint, or Adobe, or creating them in Word and making them into PDFs. So I know that was a ton of information. And it's really important that you have an understanding, not on how to fix alt text on an image, but that it needs alt text. Okay. So I want you to have kind of a bird's eye view of accessibility and a good kind of general understanding of these kinds of requirements that make a document, in this case, a PDF, accessible, or a PowerPoint accessible. It seems like a pretty long list, but there are so many things that these three types of documents have in common that once you kind of get a mastery on one of them, it is absolutely transferable to the other types. And again, those Microsoft accessibility checkers walk you through step by step on how to remediate any errors within those documents. All right, Q&A for document accessibility or anything else that we have covered today.
Sally, there is a question from Yvonne in the chat.
Okay.
So looking at a PDF with 0%, it says PDF can't be opened and to upload an openable document, I guess, but I can open it from Canvas.
Okay, so I am so glad you asked this, Yvonne, because there's two things going on here. Chances are, if it says it cannot be opened, it's corrupted. And that is a term that we used to see a lot with files being corrupted. If it is possible, try going back to where that document came from. The other thing I wanted to, like if you created it in Word and then created a PDF out of it, that would be the best place to start, is the original source of the document. The other thing that I haven't fully addressed is, if you remember back at the beginning, I told you there were 3 giant issues in all our courses, and one of them was PDFs are not OCR. Okay, so let me quickly show you the difference between OCR and non-OCR. Okay, so OCR basically means it can be read by a screen reader. Well, how does that work? So here is an OCR PDF. I want you to notice what I can do in this OCR PDF. I can select the text. That means that each character on this page is readable by assistive technology. So if you can select the text, it's OCR and it is readable. What sometimes happens is we have older documents we want to use in our courses, but we don't have a digital version of it. And so what we do is we slap it on the scanner and we scan it. Well, sometimes that scanner will not create a PDF like this. It'll create a PDF like this. Okay, same document, but notice I'm clicking and dragging and I can't select any of the text. Sometimes it will actually look like, open. It'll look like, oh, that didn't do it. It'll look like an image. This is what I needed. Come on, I'm dragging you over. So when I try to click it, that's what I see. I can't select a single line or a single word. It's selecting everything. And this is a PDF that was created from an image scan, basically. So unless you alt text this image and provide all the text on this image, the person using a screen reader can't get any information from this. So this is not what you want. This is 100% inaccessible. And this is what you do want with PDF. No, up here. This is what you do want with PDFs, where you can select that. Did that help? Okay, Yvonne, to get a PDF that is OCR, there are scanners that will do an OCR scan. I am not fully aware of what each individual department has in terms of their scanners, but if you have something like this, one of the things you can try, and it's going to depend on the quality of the scan, is sometimes Adobe Acrobat will allow you to export it into Word, and it will actually clean it up and become an OCR document. So you can try that. If it doesn't work, Word documents that are saved as a PDF will be OCR. Yes. If you're doing it all digitally, you're pretty much assured that it will be OCR. The only time we get this kind of issue is when someone's trying to take a non-digital document, a hard copy, and make a digital version of it. Okay. Thank you, Nico. I appreciate you coming. Any other questions about some of these document issues that we've talked about? Laura, you are exactly right. But always if you're taking a picture of a document, that is absolutely non-OCR. If you are scanning a document, it depends on the scanner. Yes, scanning without OCR will create a inaccessible document. Thank you, Peter. Yes, there is software that can convert it. I don't know that A&M provides it, but I'm pretty sure that it's out there because I've seen it.
Yeah, I don't think it's universally available. We have it in the Disability Resources Office, obviously, because we do have to use it sometimes to make documents accessible.
Thank
But
you.
what we use is called Abby Fine Reader.
Mhm.
And I think Equidocs may be another one. I'm not the technology person, but yes, there are some options out there.
Any other questions about documents? Well, I want to thank you for attending. You have resources available to help you meet the needs of your students, especially as you are creating an accessible course or implementing UDL. There's a lot of support for you for universally accessible education. The Office of Disability Resources works directly with students in determining their eligibility for supports based on their documented disabilities. Office for Academic Innovation supports the tools that assist in creating digitally accessible instructional content within the digital learning environment. And we're also in the process of developing and providing extensive support for everything I've discussed today. So stay tuned for those upcoming resources. Also represented today is the Center for Disability and Development. They focus on inclusive education, research initiatives, and service and outreach support. So I appreciate their participation in today's webinar. Not mentioned on this screen is Technology Services. They have an entire accessibility initiative. They support Office 365 and other productivity tools. So if you have specific questions about those tools outside of Canvas, they can answer them in addition to me. And then also not listed here is the Center for Teaching Excellence. They offer great sessions on UDL on a fairly regular basis. And if you're still feeling a bit hesitant in adopting digital accessibility in your courses, especially given the volume of stuff you heard today, please know it's a process. Everyone moves at a different pace and you got to start somewhere. So there are many myths about digital accessibility, and I have a link that someone's going to put in the chat for me about
It's there.
Excellent, about accessibility and what you do need to do and what you don't need to do. And it's a really good resource that's offered to you by Technology Services. I want to thank you for attending today, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see who's here. So thank you for attending, and I look forward to hearing from you or supporting you in whatever way I can.
Thank you so much, Sally, for your time today and your expertise. You did an excellent job. And this is one webinar that I will be sharing broadly. And it's very, very important. And so I just thank you so much for all the work that you're doing on campus and sharing your information beyond even Texas A&M here. So thank you so much. And everyone in the chat box, we shared an evaluation survey, and this is a great way for you to provide feedback on what's working well and what's not working well to help us in preparing for more webinars in the spring semester. But we want to thank you guys for your time, and especially thank you, Ali, for all that you do, and thank you for your time today and your support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.